Hey, what's up? It's T-Dog, and since I'm almost caught up to One Piece, I felt what better video to make than the problem with One Piece.
You lift yourself up on your feet. Let's get it on.
Okay, so what I'm going to be doing for this video is I'm going to be going through each one of the New World One Piece arcs. I'm going to be saying my major thoughts on the arc, mainly what went wrong with them, and of course, if there are some things with the arc that went really well, I will also say those because, I don't want to sugarcoat things one way or the other, so, let's just get into it. First arc in the New World, Fishman Island. Myself, as well as another manga YouTuber named Moffat Hunter, were talking about this arc a while ago on Twitter, and we were essentially mainly talking about how the racial and historical themes really made the arc, and how none other One Piece arc really has these themes. And I really do think those themes were executed incredibly, because it's not easy for a shonen battle manga series to pull something off this seriously and have it be done well. This arc deals with themes such as slavery and civil rights, but the main reason why it really stands out with those themes is that it draws parallels to the real world, and this arc really served as a metaphor for slavery in US history, as well as the 1960s civil rights movement, which isn't always easy to portray in fictional media, but Oda did this especially well. Unfortunately though, the pacing of Fishman Island really killed this arc, and when I mean the pacing killed the arc, I mean the pacing came in like some Jason Voorhees, Jeepers Creepers type of stuff, and absolutely slaughtered this arc. A near perfect example of this is the Fisher Tiger Otohime backstory, which should have been one of the biggest staple moments in the One Piece historical lore, but in reality it just came across as filler due to the pacing. Actually, it came across as filler in the manga, which is a term that's never used politely, and it's a term that's almost laughably joked at this point, because the manga isn't supposed to have filler. The anime has filler, and when the manga, which is supposed to be the purest form of the story, doesn't even have the proper telling of that story, it makes it hard to give One Piece credibility at all. Not only that, but this is an arc that should have been heavily focused on story. It should have been an arc that heavily should have been focused on characters, but in reality was too boggled down with fights and too boggled down with henchmen that didn't really matter at the end because they were written to be defeated. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me on that one, and I know a lot of people are going to be like, oh well, One Piece is a shonen battle manga, so that means it should have, battles in there. But the thing is, Fishman Island is an arc that doesn't need battles, or at least it only needs a few battles. Maybe one with Hody Jones, and he could have been a lot smaller of a character, and maybe Vanderdecken, even though he was basically pointless in the arc aside from comic relief, which again, this arc doesn't need comic relief because it's about slavery and civil rights, so get that comedy out of here and save it for the next few arcs. I like the ending though. I like where Fishman and humans were kind of brought together and unified at the end. What I don't like though is how this arc really had absolutely no justification to be this long.
Hey, what's up guys, it's Moffat here, and it's a pleasure to talk about Fishman Island for me personally, so thanks for having me on here, T-Dog, really appreciate it. So the thing is that really irks me with the One Piece community is that Fishman Island is so looked down upon. In fact, it's known as one of the worst arcs post-time skip. Whether or not that is true, it still doesn't matter. It's still a great arc because Oda portrayed a theme in that arc like no other, the theme of equality. You see, the fishmen in One Piece represent African Americans during slavery. I'm sure you can see what I'm talking about. And Oda wasn't cliche about it when he tried to tell us that fishmen and humans should be equal. He didn't just have Luffy come out and say, free the fishmen because we should all be treated equally, blah blah. In fact, Oda just had Luffy unconscious and got the job done. Luffy was pretty much on his deathbed till Jinbei decided to save his life, giving him his blood. Now, that doesn't seem like a huge deal, but what that showed everyone was that fishmen and humans have the same blood running through their veins, just like black people and every other color. We all share the same blood, hence we should all be treated the same. Doesn't matter whether one has fins or not, or one has a skin tone darker than the other, we are all the same. That sent such a powerful message that I think a lot of people might might have missed. And it was some masterful storytelling that we've seen from Oda. Like, it was just fantastic.
So next I want to talk about Trafalgar Law, and I actually did have a little bit of a joke planned, a little bit of a funny segment planned where I was going to wear this Trafalgar Law hoodie, and I was going to switch into it right at this point of the video and not really mention it at all, and then take it off after I was done talking about Trafalgar Law, and it would have just been, a nice, funny addition to the video. But I've actually had this since I was 14 years old, so needless to say, it's pretty small, and it was too much of a tight squeeze to put on, so I guess I can't really do that, but just know it's the thought that counts. Anyways, I'm going to try and make this relatively quick with Trafalgar Law, because this doesn't exactly pertain to the New World stuff, but it definitely has become a lot more noticeable, and he's a lot more overpowered since the New World time skip. Okay, so in case you forgot, Trafalgar Law has the powers of the Op fruit, also known as the powers of the Operator or a Surgeon, something of that general area, and he's supposed to have those powers. Keyword being supposed to, because he really only has a few powers that actually follow those rules, and after that he's basically a god. And I'd go as far as to say that Trafalgar Law is one of the most powerful characters in One Piece, and Oda really just scales his powers back so he's not more powerful than Luffy. Real quick, I think the abilities with the scalpels and other tools that operators would use make sense, but what doesn't make sense are the abilities Chambres and Room, also known as Body Swap, Position Swap, and essentially just a gravitational pull limitedly, and basically a force field among a certain area, which really doesn't make sense. I saw a video where they were saying it was basically supposed to be an operating room, which really still doesn't make sense. And the position swap, I really still don't get to this day. And body swap, unless we're talking about plastic surgery here, yeah, that doesn't really pertain to an operator, because again, the position swap, the way it's done, doesn't really make sense there, and I'm just going to leave it at that. As for more things about Punk Hazard, I think that Caesar was a pretty good villain, and I really like how he continues into the later arcs. I really think it was cool how he continues into Dressrosa and Whole Cake Islands. I like that because it's not too common that a villain does that in One Piece, and yeah, I think that was cool. So yeah, those are pretty much the main points I have to say about Punk Hazard. Come on, Oda. Come on, man. You're really making me look bad here. When I was reading Dressrosa, I was messaging all my YouTube friends, and I was like, guys, come on. Dressrosa's not bad. It can't be that bad. You know, the first half is fun. It has some goofs. It has some gas. Yeah, it has some slip-ups. Is it slow a little bit? Maybe. Does it have some fights? Yes, and they're great. The gladiator stuff, top notch, cream of the crop, great manga content, but the thing is, that really didn't last long.
The rest is annoying garbage, so why don't you do us both a favor and pull the trigger? Do it, motherfucker! Pull the trigger!
Like I said about Fishman Island with the pacing, the same applies to this arc. Granted, not as much, because the pacing is mainly in the second half, where it could have been 2 volumes, but it got stretched out to 5, and after Sabo gets the flame fruit, it gets stretched out far too long. But nonetheless, the pacing got painfully slow, and it really hindered my enjoyment of this arc. So for those of you who have seen my video on Berserk, where I essentially said that the Band of the Hawk were basically the perfect example of how to write a non-blood related manga family, yeah, well, the Don Quixote family in Dressrosa is the exact opposite of that. Too many characters, most of them weren't that great, and you could probably figure out the rest because the main villains in that arc that I liked besides Doflamingo were Violet, which she isn't really a villain, Diamante, Baby 5, and Senior Pink. I think that really says a lot, because if the best villain in that arc that's not the main villain is a guy dressed as a baby, then that might be a red flag, but at the same time, Mad props to Oda on that one, because that was some feels right there. There were a lot of assholes in this arc. I'm not going to talk about every single one of them because that would take way too long, but I'm just going to talk about the biggest one, Gear 4th. The main problem I have with Gear 4 is that it really discredits the rest of the crew. What I mean by that is if you look at the early stuff in One Piece, the main characters really have to work together to defeat a villain, but now it really seems like Luffy can just do anything he wants and the rest of the characters are just there to fulfill their own plots, which I don't fully mind because I think that the plots with Sanji and Zoro and the rest of the crew have been interesting, but it really doesn't make them as valuable as they used to be. Zoro, Kinemon, and the strongest gladiators on the island were trying to break the strings of the cage, and they couldn't do it no matter what. But instantly, Luffy breaks the strings with Gear 4th once Doflamingo ties the strings around him, and that is the worst ass pull in this arc. Essentially, why that's a big ass pull is because it's basically saying that Luffy is stronger than all those other people combined, and even though that may not be fully true, it really is in that moment, and it really ruins that big finale. Lastly though, with Dressrosa, I do want to give some props to Oda for that God Usopp stuff, because that was hilarious. I was really laughing my ass off when reading that, and I think that was one of the funniest moments in New World One Piece. So I don't really have a ton of opinions about Zoe, positive or negative, because it's a very straightforward arc, and it's not really that eventful. It's more of a transition arc into, you know, Wano and Whole Cake. But nonetheless, I do still really like the stuff with the road poneglyphs. The main reason for that is because the road poneglyphs really put the end of One Piece into perspective, and before this, I wasn't really sure how much more of One Piece we were gonna have, but now we really have an end goal in sight, and now Robin really has a purpose in the series, which she didn't really have much of in the New World. So yeah, hopefully Nico Robin has some amazing character moments in the future arcs, because she was probably my favorite character in pre-time skip series, and now she's really relevant, so hopefully she makes a comeback in the series. So that's pretty much it for this video. I know a lot of people probably wanted me to talk about Whole Cake Island, but since I'm not fully finished with that arc, and since this video is already pretty long, I feel that it would be better suited to just make another video about that, and maybe combine it with a few other arcs as well later down the road. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. If you enjoyed, make sure to slap that like button, subscribe, and how about you drop a comment ranking the New World One Piece arcs, as well as just giving your overall opinion on New World One Piece, and if you think it's worse or better or whatnot. And yeah, I will see you guys in the next video. I have some bangers planned, so see you guys next time.
I've done too great for us, my